Vice President Kamala Harris, just moments ago, the article published, telling the Wall Street Journal she is, quote, ready to serve as President Biden faces new scrutiny over his age and mental fitness.
This coming just days after the special counsel report that found President Biden should not face charges for willfully retaining and sharing highly classified information, but it also described him as a, quote, an elderly man with a poor memory, prompting an angry response from the president.
President Biden, something the special counsel said in his report is that one of the reasons you were not charged is because, in his description, you are a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory.
I'm well-meaning, and I'm an elderly man, and I know what the hell I'm doing. I've been president. I put this country back on its feet. I don't need his recommendation. It's totally
How bad is your memory, and can you continue as president?
My memory is so bad, I let you speak.
The president doubling down, saying he does in fact know what he's doing. Meantime, a number of Democrats jumping to the president's defense, saying he is mentally sharp.
The most difficult part about a meeting with President Biden is preparing for it, because he is sharp, intensely probing, and detail-oriented and focused.
Does the president have any memory problems?
He does not. I was in the interview room. I didn't come away from the special counsel's failure to ask precise questions and think to myself, he has mental acuity problems. I just thought he was asking bad questions.
I can tell you, this was the day before that interview, I can tell you he was sharper than anyone I've spoken to about a very complex geopolitical urgent issue.
The Vice President Kamala Harris denounced the report as politically motivated and gratuitous, saying the assessments of Biden's mental sharpness were both factually and procedurally wrong in a document solely meant to determine if a crime was committed. Now, back to that Wall Street Journal report, should be clear that Kamala Harris spoke to the Journal last week when she was asked about whether or not she was ready to serve, and that she responded saying, I am ready to serve. There is no question about that. So keep in mind, prior to the release of Special Counsel Hur's report. Joining us now, Larry Bucshon is a Republican Indiana congressman and a member of the GOP Doctors Caucus. Frank Contessessa is a doctor at Custom Care Medical. Gentlemen, welcome, and thank you very much for coming on. There's actually a lot to dive into when it comes to the story here. We've got the VP's response. We, of course, have President Biden's last-minute press conference here. And then overall, Robert Hur's assessment of President Biden's mental acuity. So with that, let me start with the congressman. Just your read on what we learned last week from Special Counsel Robert Hur, the fact no charges are coming forward, and yet his read on the president's mental sharpness is lacking.
Well, I think it's pretty clear to see. I mean, the American people are seeing it. I mean, you don't have to have a special counsel report to recognize that the president has some level of mental impairment. I've recently been through this with my mother. And so I think it's honestly a sad situation. I think people around the president, particularly his family, need to recognize this. And honestly, he needs to drop out of the presidential race. I think that the president clearly has some level of impairment, and I'm worried about that from a national security standpoint. But more, I'm worried about the president himself and his family. This is really something that they should be telling him to drop out of this race.
Yeah, again, in Hur's, the special counsel in that report goes on to say that the jury would likely see him as a well-meaning elderly man with a poor memory, so declining to, again, bring charges. But again, it goes back to health concerns, even from a special counsel. That's where I'll bring in Dr. Frank Contessessa. If you could talk to us about this, we've seen the gaffes, we've seen the stumbles for years and years. The classified documents case, you have a special counsel, a deposition happening with the president in closed doors, and then his report comes out. And again, it hits hard on age, mental acuity, memory. He couldn't remember, according to Hur, he couldn't remember, and I say him, meaning the president, he couldn't remember when he was vice president. He could not remember when his son Beau died. This all according to the special counsel's report. Dr. Frank Contessessa, can you talk to us about that? A president here in his 80s, mental decline. It's notable from this interview and the report. Your thoughts on this?
Well, Sean, really what the last week crystallized for me was it really confirmed what we've been seeing for the last several years. We've all seen the decline. We've seen the occasional gaffe, the occasional misstep turn into basically a regular pattern of mistakes and gaffes and falling down and all of these problems. And it's not just the verbal gaffes, it's the stumbling, it's the shuffling gait, it's the squinting expression. It's all of these signs that the congressman and I, as physicians, and really most people who have a pair of eyes, have seen the decline. And I think seeing the report from the special counsel last week, somebody who spent a long period of time and interviewed the president, because we're just limited by what we see in the media, but it really crystallized for me the pattern of things, even hearkening back to an earlier time, which you see with dementia patients. You've heard him say, Joe Biden, I'm running for Senate, when he was running for the presidency. We've seen him forget the time periods that he was vice president. So this is all very typical pattern, cognitively speaking, that you see in somebody with moderate to advanced dementia.
We'll keep an eye on that, of course, closely watching. In the meantime, we are learning about the president's cabinet, or at least one of his members. Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin is back in the hospital, this time for symptoms suggesting an emergent bladder issue. The Pentagon did release a statement this time around. They said that he would be transferred and the functions and duties of the office of the Secretary of Defense would go to the Deputy Secretary of Defense, Kathleen Hicks. She's assumed the role and the functions and the duties. The chairman and the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the White House and Congress have been notified. So this time around, Congressman Bucshon, people know the whereabouts of the DOD secretary. Does this tell you that policy is now updated, that they're implementing transparency this time around? Did they learn from the mistake?
Not really. I think they learned for the politics of it. It was a serious mistake, but also, for national security, the United States is the most powerful country on earth, and we don't know where our defense secretary is. In fact, the president didn't know where he was. So, no, I think they learned that was bad politics. I mean, it was a mistake, clearly, not to tell the American people where the secretary was. You don't have to tell the details of the medical history, but I think a person in his position, the American public have a right to know. And not only the American public, our allies around the world have a right to know who's in charge over at the Pentagon. So, it's good that they announced this time. Look, I hope the secretary recovers quickly from whatever situation he's in. But yeah, they learned it was bad politics, basically.
Yeah, 3 hospitalizations. Again, the one in December, then in January, the one that was the one that no one knew about, and then now this one. But just interesting, too, pointing out, again, public duties, announcing in a press briefing when he was asked, is he, again, physically fit to continue his role? As many noted, he had to take a golf cart up to where he was going. And he said, yes, he is. Obviously, this has definitely downgraded and changed in that sense. Again, hospitalized yet again, though everyone knows and is aware, and powers have been transferred. Congressman Larry Bucshon, Dr. Frank Contessessa, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Overseas.